Welcome back to our series, The Delegation Shift. Let go to level up. This series is focused on providing the tools for growth-minded leaders ready to move beyond the weeds and into their next level.
Today's episode is Delegate Like a Leader, no more boomerangs, just breakthroughs.
That's right, because let's face it, if delegation feels like a boomerang that just keeps coming back, it's not working for you, it's working against you.
Right. And so let's set the scene. You know the drill. You delegate a task and somehow it ends right back on your plate. Now, it happens. And we're trying to talk about why and what we can do differently. Nichole, I would love to hear from you in your experience when this happens with CEOs. What could they have done differently? If they delegated something to you and it ended up back on them, what went wrong here?
So when I have worked with clients, I know that the reason it's ending up on their plate is not their fault because they are being genuine and giving me the information that they think that I need. But I am sending it back to them because one, I can't fully complete it because I don't have all the necessary information, the details, those things that live in their brain, like we talked about in the previous episode, the things that live in their brain that they forgot to pass on to me. Or I complete it with completely different expectations of what their goal actually was, just due to some miscommunication. Another thing is that they want the stamp of approval on anything that I'm doing before it's either sent out, added to Drive, that email is sent to that client. So that tends to be the top reasons. There are other reasons, obviously, but those are the top reasons why I end up having to send things back to the clients that I'm supporting before I actually complete a task in its fullest.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like that's probably the most common that we see. And I can say, as a business owner, I'm guilty of that as well. So let's just going back through what you said. I think what really is happening here is instructions are vague. Maybe, like you said, information just isn't there. The context is missing. Maybe ownership is unclear, or let's be honest, the CEO or delegator just doesn't trust that it'll be done right. So they tend to hover. And like you said, the feedback, the amount of times that you need feedback is just too often. So it creates a bottleneck. It just ends up not getting done in the time needed. So I think sometimes in order to delegate successfully, we kind of have to let go of some things, but also give a little more to in other areas.
Yeah, because you hit a plateau of progress, right? When something is constantly being put back on your plate, things are just kind of there. They're not actually being done. And the hard truth is that delegation without trust and clarity isn't leadership. It's micromanaging in disguise. And that's something that you, as a business owner or the delegator, want to avoid so that you can focus on what you need to focus on day in and day out after you've delegated a task.
Right. And I talk to our clients about this all the time. If you get that feeling of micromanagement, it's okay, but you have to uncover why. Because nobody wants to be a micromanager and nobody wants to be micromanaged. So let's talk about how high impact leaders actually delegate. I think the big thing is shifting their mindset.
Yes, it 100% is, because delegation is not a task. It's a mindset shift. It's high performing CEOs, when they think about the time and the trust and the team differently, all of these mindset changes have to be practiced, because just like in sports, practice makes perfect. And we have to remember that it is a marathon, not a sprint. So you can't just unload everything that's on your plate that you want to delegate off. You have to be strategic about the way that you're delegating and who you're delegating it to in order to cross that finish line successfully.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I tend to tell our clients about delegation is you really need to focus on outcomes, not methods. So what I said, I think the other day in a team meeting, we were talking about this, is delegate the what, not the how. So we want to make sure that when you're delegating, if it doesn't have to be done in a certain exact way, make sure you're just saying, hey, here's the end result I'm looking for. I trust you to figure out how to get there. I mean, I have done this recently where I have said, hey, we need this page on our website created or updated here's what I need on it. And I didn't give much more than that because in reality, it doesn't matter. I didn't need XYZ to happen in order to get there. So I think that that feels, really good for the person who is receiving it because it empowers them a little bit. You can even say, I trust you to figure it out. Please let me know if you have any questions along the way or if you want my feedback. But if you give that, here's the what, I trust you to figure out the how. Something else that I see with delegators who are good at it is prioritizing clarity over control. So you want to make sure you're clear and kind. So one of our favorite books here at Elevate is Brené Brown's Dare to Lead. If you haven't read their book, please do. And I think that for me, it really, when it comes to feedback, it's just being clear. We don't want to control everything, but we do need to be clear and make sure that we're not beating around the bush to the point that we're muddying the waters and it becomes confusing. So I think just being clear and kind is very important. And I think just being willing to also not just create quick fixes, but also maybe systems around it. So like quick fixes tend to lead to non-teachable tasks, and you're going to have to continually, kind of get involved over and over and over again. So if you can delegate maybe the whole piece of it, or at least a larger piece of this process, it's much better than just delegating the teeny tiny little quick fix in between or the quick task in between. If you can delegate the larger piece of it, you're going to see less questions because they're going to have a fuller scope of understanding.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is just, like I said, assigning ownership, just knowing that someone is truly going to own this and it's theirs. And I trust you. Like I said, I trust you to get it done. It is your area of expertise, right? And speaking of that, the other thing of knowing what their area of expertise is really get to know your team. What are they good at? What are they interested in? Where do their strengths lie? And when you ask yourself, okay, I know this doesn't have to be done by me, but who on my team could it be done by? Like, you should be able to, oh, I know exactly who this is. And even if they hadn't thought of it themselves, if you know your team well enough, then, delegating is going to become even easier because you're going to have the confidence in delegating something to someone who's really strong in it, maybe even better than you in that area, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think relying on your team and understanding who they are as people and not just that email that they have or what their job title is. And I think we're definitely going to go over this in another series, but that can be a part of your onboarding process. Like, you can ask all of these questions as you're bringing team members on so that you have a clear understanding of what are they proficient in? What skills are they proficient in? What do they love to do? Because maybe they're not necessarily proficient in it, but they are so willing to learn more about that platform or learn more about that task that you can delegate to them, and they're going to turn around with something that is 10 times better than what you ever thought it was going to be. And it's just such a powerful question to ask yourself, who can do this instead of me? Because when you delegate it to somebody, they're not just managing the task, they're multiplying impact. It's not just your own impact as a CEO that you're multiplying your team's impact because you're telling them, I trust you. And that's going to lead to better team engagement, better team culture. Like, the culture that you build in a business is huge, and that could make or break your business in some sense when it comes to your team, who you're supporting as your client or your customer. Because if they feel that from their CEO, it's going to trickle down and it's going to be throughout the entire business. But it also leads to like open suggestions from your team. They're going to come to you with new ideas. The list goes on and on when you allow a team member that's supporting you and you're delegating to people. I mean, the list is just, it could go on and on.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that, you hit the nail on the head with the team engagement in not only with each other, but in the mission of what you're trying to accomplish. So when I said earlier, delegate the what, and they can figure out the how, I also think it's important to add the why on, not everything, but there are certain things that I think if not only you're saying I'm empowering you to figure out the how, and here's why we're doing this, and then they get to feel like they're a part of something that is big and exciting, or, having them be really aligned in the why and see they get to see their own personal impact in what they're doing. I also think that that's the team engagement and team culture right there. Huge perk to delegating for sure. Um,
Absolutely.
Now, if we were to talk about how to delegate so it doesn't boomerang back to you, right? So I think that there's quite a few things that you can do to make sure that this doesn't happen. And it's not a perfect science, but it is things that we can be more aware of as delegators. So a couple of things. One is I always suggest clarify the outcome. So what does done look like to you? For me, I always think of marketing because it's the easiest way to explain it. But in content creation, we have a brand kit, we have our fonts and our colors and all of that. But Nichole knows, and the other people who help create our content, there are little things that I really don't like. And so, but they would never know that if I didn't say that to them. So there are certain things now that when they go to create content for us, I don't see those certain things coming to me for approval anymore, because
Hmm.
now I have let them know this is something is not considered done to me ever, because it always needs to be different. And so just being able to say to someone, if I were to do this myself, here's what I would do. Here is the end result. Here is what success looks like in this task. And for those of you who also, by the way, are receivers of delegation tasks, ask that question. Thank you so much for sending this over. What does done look like to you? You could also ask that question if the delegator is not giving that to you. I also talked about just sharing the why, making sure that there's a empowerment and alignment in why am I doing this and how is this going to impact, whether it's the person, the project, the whole company, whatever it is. It really the empowerment that I have seen our team have when they know that they are working really hard on something that either makes a big difference at Elevate or for our clients' businesses, you can see it, you can feel it. Another thing is assigning ownership. So not can you help me get this thing done? It's more of, I need you to own this process. I trust you to do it, and giving them full sense of ownership. Of course, plenty of opportunities to check in and everything, but really letting them own a whole process is really helpful. We talked earlier about, dinner, right? We've given that example of delegating dinner. If you were to just delegate cutting the vegetables, but nothing else, it doesn't really make them feel like a part of dinner. But if you can help them
Mm-mm.
say that they're going to own the whole process, or if they're just the one to go to the store, but you cook the whole thing, they're not going to feel prideful in the dinner. So really giving them the whole ownership of things, I think really, again, goes back to that empowerment piece. Another thing is resources. Make sure that if you're telling them to go to the store for dinner, you're giving them the list and which store they need to go to.
Yep.
So really making sure they have the standard operating procedures, the logins, maybe some inspo pics if it's, or screenshots of something. I think that is really important. And then the last thing that I always like to suggest is check-ins. So just going back to the content creation example, it's okay if you're saying, hey, if you're creating a slide deck for someone, for example, go ahead and create the first couple of slides based on all the information I've given you, and then let's touch base so I can give you feedback. You're setting the tone that you're going to be having. There is going to be feedback. There's going to be opportunity for questions. To expect that makes the micromanagement feeling not be there. Because if you're just expecting them to create the whole thing and then you're hovering over them, asking about it constantly instead of preset, it gives them that micromanaged feeling, and it really will stifle their ability to own the process, right? So I think if you're setting the tone for parts to have feedback, I think that for me, I think that that's a really important piece, and it builds trust. So that way, the amount of feedback loops that have to happen are probably going to be less and less as you delegate more with this person, and the micromanagement feeling likely won't be there. So I think that, making sure that you're aware of what someone's working on, but you're setting the tone in when those syncs are going to happen.
Yeah, that's right. And you had mentioned earlier about even if you're not the person that is delegating the task, I think anybody who's listening to any of these things as the person who is getting the task delegated to them, take any of this information and just turn it around and say, okay, I don't have all of the information. I don't have 1 through 5. These are the questions I need to ask in order to successfully complete this task. Because as the person who is supporting the delegator, you can ask these questions, and questions should be received openly so that you can provide the task to them to their expectation, because you don't want to assume things. Assumptions are never great unless you have been working with somebody for so long that you know what their next step is going to be before they even say something. So make sure that you're asking the questions as well as the person who's getting the task delegated to you. And then you had mentioned the check-ins. So here at Elevate, we like to call them our syncs. We do these in person with anybody who is leading a department or a project or anything like that. And I know that for myself, when we have our syncs, Ashley and I have our syncs, it allows me to have ownership in what I'm leading. And in my position, I know that I can bring everything to Ashley and say, I need feedback on this. This is what I have completed. What do you think about this? So it's so much more collaborative. And we are, I'm sure, going to go into this in the team culture series that we're going to do, but I prepare an agenda before every sync that we have. And on that agenda is we do a quick check-in, like a personal check-in. How am I feeling? What's working? What's not working? Where are there gaps that I'm noticing? What do I need additional support on that I'm not getting that I feel like I need in order to be successful in my role? We also talk about things that I've put on the agenda that have been completed, where I'm like, okay, this is done. It was on my to-do list. Now it's off, just as an FYI. We talk about action items where I need feedback. I need suggestions. I need a collaboration because, again, even in my role, there are times where I am too close to something that I have tunnel vision and I need a second set of eyes on it. And it's also an accountability exercise, really. Like, I'm keeping myself accountable by making sure that I have everything I need to talk about. And then it's keeping Ashley accountable to know that she is there to give me that feedback and she's putting that ownership and that trust in me so that I can be successful in my role, which then leads to her being successful in her role. So my suggestion, and I highly recommend to anyone who is out there, whether you are a CEO and you're supporting and you're delegating to somebody else on your team, or you are the person being delegated to, set up those syncs, set up a cadence, set up the agenda so that you know that, one, the CEO that is delegating to you, they're not doubling their workload. And you know that you're able to get live feedback on what you need so you don't have that back and forth of email or it boomerangs back to their plate because you just can't get it done with the information that you have. And a key thing to take away here is make sure that there's nothing broken in the handoff, because if you can fix it on the front end, the back end will continue to flow and you'll be able to have successful tasks delegated like get go.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there, like you said, we'll talk about it later in our team culture series, but I'm a huge fan of the way that our syncs are structured at Elevate because it really is honestly positive accountability both ways. You can kindly remind me that you're still waiting for something from me from a week ago or whatever it might be. And sometimes that's also like, hey, let's just get that done live while we're here together. And that's fine. So really having you organize and be able to give me updates on what you've been working on is so helpful because again, that is something that then I know it's not going to be something, okay, all business owners, all people who delegate things, you know what I'm talking about, that 2 a.m. wake up of, oh my gosh,
Yes.
did Nichole get this done? I don't have that feeling because we make sure to discuss these things all the time. And so I think that it's so nice to have this open feedback loop both ways. And yeah, so huge fan of it. And like Nichole said, if you're not doing it, definitely set it up. And we'll get into it more in another series, but so something else in regards to these syncs and this delegation and this communication that we really want to make sure is happening, especially in the beginning, is have a bit of like a delegation debrief, right? The first few times you're delegating either to the one person or within the one project, if you will, make sure that you're having conversations of, okay, how did that go, right? So you're going to ask, what was clear? What was confusing? What would have made it easier? So really something like what we like to call here at Elevate a lessons learned sync. And we do this not only for, like I said, after certain projects are delegated for the first time, but also we do it, and we will talk about this later in a client relations series that we're going to do, but around when client projects are wrapped up, what went wrong, what could have gone better, what went well. So really
Mhm.
thinking about, I think we talked about it in a former episode, but like, what are you going to stop, start, and continue? Things like that, those kinds of questions, because there might be something that because you're moving so quickly, you just didn't have a chance to really talk about. So just make sure you take, even if it's just 5 or 10 minutes, to talk about lessons learned, right? So that way it gets easier and better every time.
Exactly. And I want to remind everybody, we are not aiming for perfection. You're not aiming for perfection. You're building a culture of clarity and growth. And for our lessons learned sync, we build those into our weekly syncs that we have to allow us to reflect on what's working, what's not working. And one of our favorite words here at Elevate is to pivot if we need to pivot. And that's what I think allows us to move forward and continue that forward momentum week after week, month after month, because we are actually being intentional about sitting down and thinking about that worked really great. Let's continue to do that. This didn't love it. Let's change it. And then this is not working at all for us. So let's get rid of it. We don't need it anymore. And I think that's what makes a difference in, continuing that forward momentum.
Yeah, and I think just like you said, the fact that we have it kind of built in because we work so closely together, there's just no way that we could have a lessons learned sync every time something gets completed. So we've just kind of built it in along the way. But because of that, you and I are both able to keep a really close pulse on either what we're working on and how it's going, or honestly, just how each other's doing as a human being.
Mhm.
And I really appreciate that. And we're able to also, how is the business doing? Is what we're doing working? Is the goal that we started out with, is it happening? We're just able to constantly have this like pulse on how things are at every level. And I think because that happens for us so frequently, we can pivot a lot easier because it's never that fire feeling. Everything that we are able to consistently address, we tackle it while it feels pretty small and pretty figure outable,
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. And we use metrics, and again, another series, another day, another time. But we use metrics a lot to review what's working well, what's not working well, and where we need to change things as well. Because metrics that data that you're getting there is going to show you exactly what's working well. How much money are you spending on this? What is our client retention? What is our turnover rate? Like all of those things play into the success of a business. So metrics are super important in that sense as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Data points are really important in these lessons learned reflections. And like Nichole said, we will talk about metrics at another time because there's a whole lot to unpack there. So, something that I would love to talk about is some mindset traps and reframes. So, we see quite a few mindset traps from our clients, from our network in general about delegation. And we have some powerful reframes that we would like to share with you.
Yes. And they're not just from our clients, they're not just from people we know. We have faced these mind traps as well in the own work that we're doing.
True.
And so these are by far some of my favorite mind traps that we have come across, but they are so impactful. So if you are telling yourself, if I want it to be done, I have to do it myself, stop right there, rewind, and say to yourself instead, if I want to grow, I need others to do it well, not perfect.
I love that. And I think, again, the growth there is that a beautiful thing can come from someone doing it with their own perspective. And we have to remember that.
Hmm. Exactly.
Another one that we see is delegating takes too much time. I don't have time for this. I think I hear that a lot. I know I have been there. I think I mentioned it earlier. When you feel like you are so overwhelmed, it really does feel like I don't have time to figure out what to delegate and how to delegate it. I get it. But
Hmm.
again, you have to shift that mindset to it's going to save me time if I do this right. So I'm going to invest a little bit of time now to get a lot of time back later.
Absolutely. And then One of my favorites is I can't let go of control. That's micromanagement in disguise, but you want to shift that to control is costing me capacity. If you control so much on your plate and you have to have your hands in every single pot that is boiling on the stove, where are you able to focus on your CEO work? You can't because you're too busy controlling everything else that can be done by somebody else. So remember, control is costing you capacity and you just need to ease up and let somebody else take the reins.
Yeah, I think that last one is huge. And the more you hold, the more you block, right? You cannot do more if you're holding on to everything else. So I think it's important. Again, I've said this before, there's only so many things that you can get done in a day. We all have the same amount of time in a day. So let's make sure that the time you're spending and the things you're holding on to are helping you get to where you want to go. We want to make sure that you remember that leadership means learning to let go of certain things, learning to trust that other people can get these things done, sometimes better than you were doing in the first place. So learn to let go.
That's right. Now, here's our final habit to strengthen your delegation muscle. So, you have delegated the tasks, you have moved things off of your plate and given ownership to somebody else. But what you also need to do is you need to set aside CEO time. CEO time is an intentional time that you set aside to reflect on what's working for yourself and what's not working in your role and the responsibilities that you've taken on. Because as a business grows, things are going to shift. So maybe there's new responsibilities on your plate that you can now delegate to somebody else. Or maybe there's something that's no longer sparks joy in your life and it used to. You can delegate that to somebody else. It doesn't mean that you're not still, owning your responsibilities, but you're asking somebody else to take some ownership in it as well. And that's okay.
Yeah, I think that is definitely one of the biggest lessons that I have learned is that as a business owner, I do tend to be involved in a lot. And the intentional time that I take on reflection and strategy, a lot of people call this CEO time, it really is important. Otherwise, you will find yourself just kind of ping-ponging between things all day. So setting an intentional regular appointment with yourself to reflect on not only the delegation things like what did I do that someone else could have handled recently, what are more things that I don't have to do, what doesn't have to be done by me. So really, and that is a really important piece of the CEO time, but also just time for strategic reflection and planning. That was really big for me, is to continue to make sure that I had time to look at the health of the business. Like we mentioned, metrics, things like that. What is my team getting done? All of that. And I know we're planning on getting into more of the strategic planning piece later, but I just wanted to remind you guys that making that regular CEO time is really important, and holding that appointment just like you would hold a client meeting is also very important, because guilty as charged here, I will just book right over that. And I regret it. And so I think that that is one thing that I have learned, is that I have to honor that time and I have to hold to it, and I have to turn my focus mode on and go ahead and just kind of get that strategic planning done. It's not something that you can ping pong between, right? So like this really is time that you have to put that hat on and not flip flop between 100 other things. So make that appointment with yourself on a regular basis and keep it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know we talked about it before about calendar management being something that you can delegate, right, to your EA or somebody else that's supporting your team. They're going to hold that boundary probably a little bit better than you will and not allow anybody to book over that time spot. So if you are afraid that you're going to book over that time spot, have somebody else manage your calendar and do that calendar management so that you have that CEO time for the reflection. And then once you answer all the questions that you've reflected on and you've done a little bit of strategy planning, adjust. If things aren't working, then change them. It's okay to change them as often as you need to, and make sure that things continue to move in forward momentum, because as businesses change, like we said, and as they grow, things are going to change constantly. And you need to be able to make those changes as needed.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that it's really important to remember that delegation isn't just a one-time thing, right? Everything that we have talked about in this whole series, I think it's just really important to remember that this is a muscle that is always going to need practice, always going to need stretching and strengthening and all of that. And so it really does come with a lot of intention. It is something that I still have to be very aware of. And there are times where I don't realize I'm not doing well at it until I feel overwhelmed. So, admission and awareness is the first step. So I think that we have given you all the tools that you need to be successful, but be gentle with yourself. If you're not getting it perfect,
Yes.
that's okay. Just try again next time or tomorrow. It's a new day. It's a new opportunity. So you're not going to run out of opportunities to delegate, right? And delegate well. So just try again. Well, everyone, thank you for tuning in to our Delegation Shift series. This is the end of the series. And if this episode has given you one step closer to freedom, hit follow and share it with a fellow business owner. And don't forget to grab your free workbook and the tools with the link in the show notes. And be sure to catch our next episode where we'll be doing our own lessons learned episode based on questions that you have submitted related to this topic. So if you have a question that you want answered by Nichole and I, please be sure to comment wherever you are listening or on our social media channels. And remember, you've got this.